The first thing I noticed wasn't the comment. It was the laughter. We were standing under warm lights, glasses clinking, music low enough for conversations to overlap. My sister's engagement party looked perfect on the surface. Flowers chosen carefully, guests curated, smiles practiced. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't excited either. I was just present. Someone asked a harmless question near the cake table. "So, how did you two meet your partners?" My sister didn't even look at me when she answered. "She's always been complicated," she said with a soft laugh. Honestly, she's too difficult for most people. The word difficult floated in the air longer than it should have. People laughed politely. A few nodded, like this was old information. Someone glanced at me, waiting for a reaction. I didn't give them one. I lifted my glass and nodded once. "You're right," I said calmly. That should have been the end of it. But public humiliation never ends where it starts. My sister leaned into the moment. She loved moments like this, the kind where attention bends toward her without resistance. "She'll be fine," she continued. "She just needs to lower her standards." More laughter. This time louder. I looked around the room, memorizing faces. Not out of anger, out of clarity. Because humiliation isn't just about words. It's about who stays quiet when they're spoken. I excused myself politely and stepped outside into the cool night air. My phone buzzed in my hand before I even unlocked it. Not because I was emotional, but because timing mattered. I typed one sentence. No explanation. No context. Just a decision. Then I put the phone back into my pocket and went inside. No one noticed anything had changed. My sister was busy greeting guests, glowing in validation. The cake was being cut. Cameras flashed. Someone called for champagne refills. Then her phone rang. At first, she ignored it. Then it rang again. She frowned slightly and checked the screen, expecting something minor. I watched from across the room as her smile faltered, not dramatically, just enough to register confusion. She stepped aside. Her face changed. Not panic. Not fear, disbelief. She looked up, scanning the room, her eyes landing on me for half a second longer than coincidence allowed. I met her gaze calmly. The music kept playing. People kept talking. No one knew anything had shifted yet. But the room felt different. Like something invisible had just snapped into place. My sister ended the call and tried to laugh it off, but the rhythm was gone. She checked her phone again. Then again. A few minutes later, she whispered something urgently to her fiancé. His expression tightened. They didn't announce anything. They didn't explain. But conversations slowed. The energy dipped. Someone asked if everything was okay. My sister smiled too fast. "Just business stuff," she said. Business. That word tasted different now. I didn't stay much longer. I said my goodbyes, hugged the people who had stayed silent, and walked out without rushing. As I drove home, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a question. It was confirmation. I parked, sat in the quiet, and exhaled slowly, not in relief, but in certainty. The narrative my sister had built for years had finally met something stronger than charm. Facts. And this was only the beginning. By the next morning, the story had already started shifting. Just not in my sister's favor. I woke up to 3 missed calls from unknown numbers and a message that said only one thing: "Can you talk today?" Urgent. I didn't reply. I made coffee, sat by the window, and let the city wake up around me. Because when people panic, silence becomes louder than explanations. My sister called an hour later. She didn't open with anger. She opened with confusion. "Did you say something to anyone last night?" she asked carefully, like she was stepping across thin ice. "No," I replied. There was a pause. "Then why did one of our partners pull out of the proposal?" I took a slow sip of coffee. "Which proposal?" I asked. Her breath caught just slightly. "The consulting deal. The one we were celebrating." Celebrating. I remembered the laughter. The word difficult. The way the room had leaned toward her without question. "I didn't pull anything," I said. "I just clarified a position." "What position?" she snapped. "Mine." The silence this time was heavier. "You don't even work in that side of things," she said quickly. You're not involved in negotiations. I didn't negotiate, I replied. I declined. Her voice sharpened. You can't just do that. I can, I said. Because the decision didn't belong to you. She hung up. That afternoon, messages started coming from people who hadn't spoken to me in years. Old contacts. Quiet professionals. The kind who don't gossip but always know more than they say. Is it true you're the final approval? We didn't realize you were still active. Can we schedule a call? I answered none of them immediately. Instead, I opened a folder on my laptop, one I hadn't touched in months. Inside were agreements, signatures, and approvals made long before my sister ever stood in front of a room pretending to lead. She hadn't lied, she had assumed, and assumption had protected her until it didn't. That evening, my sister showed up at my door. No announcement, no warning. She looked smaller without the audience. This is getting out of control, she said the moment I opened the door. You're embarrassing me. I stepped aside and let her in. Sit, I said calmly. She didn't. Everyone thinks you did this on purpose, she continued. You could have warned me. I did, I said. For years, she scoffed. You never said anything. I didn't need to, I replied. You said everything for me. Her jaw tightened. You think you're clever, she said, pulling strings in the background. No, I corrected gently. I stopped pulling them. That was when it finally hit her. If I wasn't holding things together quietly anymore, then the spotlight she loved had nowhere solid to stand. You're ruining my future, she whispered. I shook my head slowly. I didn't touch your future. I just removed myself from the lie. She left without another word. 2 days later, the engagement photos disappeared from her profile. The caption celebrating new beginnings was quietly deleted. People noticed, and they started asking questions. Questions she could no longer answer with confidence alone. Because confidence fades fast when proof starts speaking for itself. The fallout didn't arrive with shouting. It arrived with silence. 3 days after the party, a message finally came from someone who had always stayed neutral. Never close enough to take sides, never far enough to be irrelevant. We need clarification before moving forward. That was it. No blame, no drama, just a pause where momentum used to be. I agreed to a call. When it started, there were more people on the line than expected. Voices careful, words measured, the kind of tone people use when they've realized they trusted the wrong version of a story. They asked questions I had already answered in writing. I repeated myself calmly. What had been approved? What hadn't? Who had authority? Who didn't? No names. No accusations. Just facts. By the end of the call, there was nothing left to debate. Later that night, my sister called again. This time, she didn't pretend. They're reconsidering everything, she said quietly. They think I misrepresented my role. I leaned back in my chair. You did, I replied. You could fix this, she said quickly. You could tell them it was a misunderstanding. I thought about the laughter. The word difficult. The room full of people who had learned who I was from her mouth. I won't, I said. Her voice broke. You're doing this to punish me. No, I said gently. I'm refusing to protect a story that erased me. She went quiet. Weeks passed. The engagement went on, but the energy was different. Smaller. Careful. People stopped praising and started verifying. Invitations shifted. Conversations became more formal. My sister stopped posting. When we finally saw each other again, it wasn't at a celebration. It was at a meeting where roles were clearly defined, on paper, in front of witnesses. She avoided my eyes. I didn't push. There was nothing left to say. As the meeting ended, someone thanked me for bringing clarity. Not leadership, not dominance, clarity. I walked out alone and felt lighter than I had in years. Because the truth doesn't need defending once it's documented. My sister had controlled the narrative. I had controlled the proof. And when those two collided, the truth didn't shout. It simply replaced the lie.